it's not fun being a perfectionist. And this much you probably already know by now because you clicked on this video. But what you might not know is that there is a few kinds of perfectionism or perfection. And knowing this will allow you to gauge and reflect on the spot on what you're doing and why you're doing this. This is because each of these types of perfection or perfectionism has a different driving principle to them. And some of them are more healthy or helpful to us, and others are completely unhealthy and unhelpful. If you struggle with perfectionism, then there is a high chance that you also struggle with procrastination, with low self-worth, with high criticism, with all kinds of things like stress, inability to sleep, maybe even panic attacks or anxiety, that all come as a cluster fuck when it comes to dealing with perfectionism. So if that resonates, and also if you are a type of person who is maybe a dreamer, a visionary, an artist, a highly sensitive thinker and idealist like myself, then this episode will be very, very helpful for you. I know, because it would be helpful for me ages ago. So if you don't know me, my name is Gosia, and in this channel I talk all about mind, body, spirit connection of all the things that relate to the way we as highly sensitive thinkers, artists, are living and navigating our life, and how to make it easier. So without any further ado, let's talk about this perfection stuff. I hinted already as in kind of a preface, and I want to really dig deeper into the fact that it's not as easy to just change your thoughts and stop criticizing yourself for falling short to your ideals. Or maybe it's not as easy as stop comparing yourself to someone who have achieved what you want, right? And it's not easy because it's almost like a muscle memory. It's something we internalize in a deeper sense. So trying to target your conscious thoughts is kind of futile, because we've got 95 to 97% of subconscious mind that lives mostly in our body and through muscle memory, through the habit, through something that is stronger than us and urges us to go to some behaviors or have a certain outlook on life. I'm not saying this to excuse ourselves and just do nothing, because the majority of subconscious mind is so overwhelming compared to what you might be thinking and trying to mentalize. But I'm saying this for you to understand that the root cause needs to be looked at, rather than just trying to reason your way out of being a perfectionist. If that was so easy, then all the people with eating disorders would just be able to talk themselves out of these really debilitating syndromes, and they can't do it. So let me dive into the first type of perfection, which is also perfectionism. And very soon you'll understand the difference when I talk about perfection versus perfectionism. So the first type of perfection seeking behavior, which is perfectionism, comes from the need for the external validation. It's a sort of external focus on how people perceive us. It's an appearance-based perfection seeking. So what do I mean by this? It can be literally kind of physical appearance that you might be focusing on, like, how do I look? Am I skinny enough? Am I polite enough? Are people seeing me as the kind of person I want to be seen, as maybe a perfect partner, someone who is super nice, super helpful in their community, maybe their teacher's favorite, who gets all the good grades and asks just the perfect questions that are not too uncomfortable for the teacher, but make them shine in the eyes of the teacher. So if you are the type of person that I described before, maybe you're not falling into this category, but you really want to understand this first before I go deeper. So this is the type of perfection seeking, like I said, is based on appearance. And this type of perfection seeking that is focused on the external world is kind of sliding on the surface of consciousness. It's more kind of a suppressed behavior where it feels like it's stronger than what you can control. Is a kind of possession where, you know, it takes over your actions and makes you be this kind of people pleaser to appear perfect to someone. But you might be able to see when this behavior, for example, doesn't bring the results that you want to, such as you're trying to please your partner so much, but they're not giving you the rewards that you're looking for. They're just like not appreciating you enough, or, you know, the boss in your work is not really appreciating all the perfect achievements that you're trying to impress him with. And there is a sense of resentment that might come from this because you're more conscious of the effort you have to put in to appear a certain way, the price of the effort. So there's always cost, and very high cost, to seeking of these two kinds of perfection. We have these arbitrary ideals that we're aiming for, these goals, and they take a huge amount of energy and self-sacrifice in order to get there. That's why you might have to sacrifice pleasure, you might have to sacrifice free time, you might have to sacrifice your needs, you might have to sacrifice your other interests, or a play of making mistakes and exploring ideas in a free way like a human would do. But for these both kinds of perfection seeking, you might have to sacrifice them because you're so rigidly obsessed with getting to these goals. Now, the second type of perfection seeking is something that will resonate so much more with all the real artists kind of people that are also idealists, that are thinkers, that are these deep sensitive people who absorb so much discomfort and feel really in discordance when something feels off. So, like I hinted just now, it's kind of feeling-based, intrinsic perfection-seeking habit. And I talk about this as feel good because there is a gauge in you in feeling not good enough, right? So it always has polarity where you aspire to this arbitrary sense of perfection and ideal and excellence that may make you burn out. It may make you like don't sleep 4 hours into the night because you still haven't perfected this project. You don't want to hand this assignment, or you don't want to show this piece of work to someone, or whether that's an artwork, you really want to make it flawless. So it's a very self-identified sense of perfection. And the shadow side of it is you don't want to admit to yourself that you have any flaws, that you haven't thought of some solution, that there is this deeply embedded sense that you've internalized very early in childhood that doesn't allow you to settle for lower standards or for lower quality work. And this may be super, super exhausting, and I'm only telling this because this is what I've experienced for most of my life. I've been told since childhood that I was, anal, that I was perfectionistic, that I would have it only this perfect way. And it can manifest in so many different ways, not only in work, but also in optimizing every single thing. You might want to optimize this email that you send to someone. It has to be just perfect. You might want to seek a perfect expression in the way you use words or vocabulary, and you're just so accurate in the words you're seeking to use. Or you might want to optimize the temperature of your room or the tidiness of the room and all these things just to feel good. The very strong reason underneath this is that if you are highly sensitive, if you are super sensitive like myself, then you've got this gauge that's built in you, and every discordance in feeling right makes you feel very not right. So it's very arbitrary, but it's also very black and white. And this type of perfectionism and perfection seeking can be very detrimental to one's health. It has amazing potential when you look at it from the outside, as in, like, all scientists that achieved something, all inventors and artists and actors, and all people that came to become really admired in our society probably exhibited this type of intrinsic perfection seeking, right? This self-motivated seeking perfection. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to go through these thousands of iterations or thousands of trials of failing in something until they achieved this one standard that they were looking for, right? Or this invention or whatever they were seeking. So obviously in our culture, you might be super admired and you might actually be praised and rewarded for this, even though people misunderstand you for how much it takes and all the quirky behaviors of how it floods over your entire life, that you might be, well, seeming strange to others for how you see yourself, how you're particular about wanting to all things be in a very specific way, right? They might say you're weird, but they're very happy to see your amazing paintings or your inventions or your ideas, right? But the process of getting there is messy and it's painful, and it's not only painful for you very often, but it's also very painful to watch from the outside. That's why people might be like so weirded out by us when we are engaging in this perfection seeking. And I really talk about this being intrinsic because there is this gauge inside of you that tells you by the sense, by your feeling, that there is more you could do, right? And you know how what you're doing is falling short from the ideal picture of what you have in mind. And this might really make you procrastinate because you have this ideal, this super high standards in mind that is so hard to achieve that you're paralyzed to even start working because you can see in your mind's eye how much you have to tackle in this project or in this piece of work or whatever you're signing up for. And this might make you really resist this work because you're afraid of what's coming. You're overwhelmed by the idea of how much you have to put into this, right? You expect so much out of yourself from every single thing that you might really procrastinate of every small task or project or, even chores, because you have such a high standards of yourself. But here I want to dive deeper, because this type of perfection seeking can have two influences. One of them is to internalize early in childhood the external voices and expectations, the parental expectations, the societal, the cultural, all kinds of expectations. And we take them as ours. And this becomes our gauge that we criticize ourselves from within. And that's why it may seem like you don't have to listen to, what people have as an opinion right now, because you've internalized these expectations so deeply that they sound and feel like this is your voice. And this really resonates with all types of artists, idealists, philosophers, scientists, because our way of thinking early in childhood was rejected from so early on. Our perspectives, our sensitivity, and our perception of reality was so different that we very quickly had to internalize, for the sake of safety, what people were telling us, what means being a good boy or girl, what means achieving when, for example, you were praised or rewarded for your achievements, and what is the right path for finding that level of safety. So this is one underlying influence in this type of perfection that you might have internalized. But the second one is leaning towards something that is found as a perfection in nature. And I really want to explore this as that third kind of perfection. So this third type of perfection is akin to what is found in nature. And we, you have to remember, are an extension of nature. So nature doesn't seek to impress anyone, but is all the time in the state of becoming, is all the time in the state of becoming more, refining itself, of evolving, just like you might be, as in that intrinsic perfection seeking. But this type of perfection is inherent, is knowing and realizing the perfection and not seeking anything other than what wants to express itself, the life that wants to express itself through becoming. And you are always becoming as a person. It may be easy to forget that you are an extension of nature, a spiritual being that is guided by this universal intelligence that permeates through every single thing, because you're so used to living in society and hearing all kinds of expectations from others, where you might have internalized all these expectations, so much so that it has become your voice. But this third type of perfection is knowing, is inherent. There is no discussion about this. That's why there is nothing to seek anymore. It's transcendence of these two types of perfectionism that I was talking about. Nothing has to be done. Nature simply seeks to express itself. And it doesn't mean that it falls stagnant and stops evolving. The principle is different. It seeks expression of life. Now, how does it relate to you? First of all, let me talk about a tree, for example. You might look at a tree and it's full of cracks in its bark, right? The branches are all crooked and the leaves are falling down in autumn time. And over winter time, they've fallen and they're rotting in the ground. And I don't know how about for you, but for me, I adore this time. I really love it. And I love the smell of rotting leaves. I love the sense of impermanence that it reminds me of when I watch the cycles of nature. Now, when you look at nature, you don't seem to judge this. And as a sensitive person, as an artist, as an idealist, as a deep thinker, I'm betting that you love all kinds of nature and you feel at peace with nature. And you love thunderstorms and you love, the rainfall, and you love mud and soil and all kinds of things that could be seen as imperfect if you were looking at yourself and kind of trying to, draw that analogy. But nature doesn't have to be more than it is. It doesn't have to be anything different from what it's expressing today. And just like nature, you are always evolving. It doesn't happen overnight. You evolve all the time just because you're living. So there is no discussion about you stagnating. You explore and play when you realize this perfection of yourself. You become free from the unreasonable expectations of being someone that you're not. You're simply allowing yourself to follow the curiosity and the exploration, and in the work that you put out there. You don't have to be 500% of others. The piece of work that you're serving becomes then just an expression of who you are today. And yes, when you look at this piece of work in 2 weeks' time, you might feel tempted to judge it and say, how did I not think about this? How did I not see it in a different way? How come I put out this imperfect piece of work, this piece of junk? But you couldn't have, because you were in the state of evolving, that today is different than yesterday and tomorrow will be different than today. It's unrealistic to blame yourself for what you didn't know yesterday. It's unrealistic to judge and blame and criticize yourself for what you haven't predicted and all kinds of things you didn't predict when you were handing this piece of work or when you were sharing something with others. And what is realistic is to knowing that at the point of doing this, that's all you had. And we can only do our best job for in a given moment. But the unhealthy ways we become perfectionistic is that perpetuate drive to be something that we're not. It's the lack of acceptance for being who we are and shame for who we are, so that we're always wanting to be someone else. We always want to be something else through the work that we share when we engage with that kind of perfectionism. And I can only say it with so much certainty because I've seen it over and over and over, not only with my clients, but also with myself. And at this point, I'm lucky enough and happy enough to say that I know myself very well, to the point that I can most of the time see why I do what I do. And it allows me to become intentional. Intentional in the way what I do and how I do it. Not only why I do it, because that's obvious, but having the answers to these questions allow me to allocate my resources and my energy that is healthy. So I don't have to burn myself out. If you answer these questions about engaging in anything, it can allow you to ease on how much you put into anything and prioritize the things that really require more of your resources, as opposed to those that don't need this. Because let's be honest, you cannot be perfect at everything and great at everything. It's really much more helpful, and I've noticed this in my life, that I can appreciate that certain areas of my life, like work and actually self-awareness, will demand more of my energy because these things are correlated in my mind, and I always will put more attention and energy to these things. But I know when to say enough. I know when to say stop. And for this reason, what you need is embodiment and a sense of mind-body connection that allows you to feel when you're tired, that always talks to you to communicate the needs that you might have in a given moment. But when you're up in your head and allowing the head to govern your life, what will happen, you always will hear, like in an echo chamber, the conditioned voices of the society, of your parents, of everyone around you, and what is expected of you. Now, when you become embodied, when you connect the mind and the body, the awareness kind of drops and you become more in tune with yourself. What it means for your well-being, and actually also for pursuit of any dreams and goals, is that you will live out from this center inside of you, that gauge that tells you what is enough, when it's enough, who says it's enough, and it will become self-referred, knowing that you don't need others to tell you or validate you in order for you to feel good. You won't need to pursue the rewards or the accomplishment or the accolades that come through others people's acknowledgement of your worth, of how they evaluate you. You need to really internalize the referee voice, as in the perfection is realized inside of me. And what is seeking the expression is the play in life, is the curiosity, is wanting to know the answers, is wanting to make it really, really good. And these are beautiful traits, but only when they become self-referred. And yes, it took me over 3 decades, closer to 4 decades of my life, to work through this subject. And now I'm pretty satisfied at the age of 42 with where I am in seeing the perfection in me and having that sense of alignment with seeking evolution, using my intrinsic sense of the excellence, what can be better, because we have this so internalized that we're always seeking to feel better. And the sense of feeling better is that guides us. But we can't get swept by the sense of not enoughness that we internalize from our society or our culture, that tells us that only if we're this ideal perfect selves and we present this ideal image to others, then they won't reject us. Don't beat yourself up for not realizing something like that. It took a lot of self-reflection, a lot of crisis in my life, a lot of breaking of my ego that told me that I had to be someone that I wasn't. Because the two types of perfectionism are really driven by shame of not being that person that you think you should be. Let that sink for a moment, because shame is really the underlying sense of needing to be a certain way. And nature is not ashamed. It doesn't matter what other people say. The part of this journey is to accept yourself and to have the compassion for your mistakes and actually appreciate the process of seeking, of the evolution that you can observe easily in nature. Nothing happens overnight. Evolution doesn't happen, from 1 year to another. It's always a process of becoming. And nature doesn't seem to impress anyone. It's not seeking to be accepted, it's not seeking to be appreciated, but it is, right? And you might also notice that many people who don't seek to impress anyone are actually more impressive because they do things for the heck of it. They do things because they like it, because they enjoy it, because they're seeking to express themselves. And I talk about it in one of my episodes about validation, how the most charismatic people are not only those who achieved great inventions or created the most amazing pieces of art, but those who are doing things because they wanted to, because they enjoyed doing this. So here is where I wrap it up, and I hope it was inspiring. And by realizing which of the realms you're being when you catch yourself seeking perfection, you might reflect and immediately and effortlessly change into realizing the perfection that already is inside of you, because you're always going to change and evolve, and tomorrow you're always going to be better than today because you will have known better, no matter how people see it from the outside. And it's not about the outputs, it's not about the stuff that you share for people to admire. And if you're interested in the topic of the external validation that I was talking about here and there today, I will post it in the description of this episode so you can dive deeper. For now, thank you for listening, and I will talk to you very soon.